Hey Eagle fans, this is EaglefanKarl. This is going to be my preview prediction video for Sunday afternoon's game against the Chicago Bears. And I know there's a lot of people that are thinking this is going to be an easy game. It's a blowout. The Eagles are 2-touchdown favorites. There should be no problem with this. But I don't think we should completely overlook this team, and I think this game may be closer than we think it's going to be. And that's because since the Bears put Mitch Trubisky in as quarterback, they've been keeping things pretty close. Their largest margin of defeat was 8 points, and that was against the Saints. They've never been down more than 11 points in any one game when he was the quarterback, and that wasn't even for a prolonged amount of time. So for the most part, they've always been in one-score games. So what does that mean? That means they've really never had to abandon their running game, which I don't think it's going to be any surprise. I think the Bears know the only way they're going to win this game is to establish a running game against us, keep possession of the ball, try and maintain the ball for as long as possible, keep our offense off the field, and beat our defense down with prolonged drives with running the ball. That's the way if they're going to beat us, that's going to have to be how they're going to do it. So that's not going to be any big surprise to anyone if they come out and do that as their strategy. So of course, most Eagles fans are going to say, well, that leads right into our strength because, the Eagles are #1 in the league against the run, and the Bears are 5th in rushing offense. So this is going to be a classic case of two strengths for two teams clashing against each other, their running offense against our running defense, and see which one really gives way. If you recall in the prediction video I did for Dallas, I said that my real concern with Dallas or any other team that really relies on the running game is if a team really commits to running the ball against us, what would happen? And that's going to be another thing I'm going to raise for this game is, whether or not that's going to have any prolonged success. There was parts in the Dallas game before we really started blowing them out in the second half where I could see that was starting to happen a little bit, where Dallas was starting to get big chunks of yards. Now, fortunately for the Eagles, they were always able to shut them down and keep them to field goals in the first half, and then they weren't able to really get anything in terms of scoring in the second half. But even in the beginning of the second half, they were still able to get a little bit of running with that, and they were able to get to just over midfield. So we're talking about offenses that this is what they do. They try and run the ball, and if they really commit to that, my concern is that could be a problem for the Eagles over the course of a whole game. So far, one of the main reasons the Eagles have been so good against the run is that teams have had to abandon it for the fourth quarter, and in many cases for the whole second half. So that's obviously it's a good thing to have, a good problem to have. But the issue still is the Eagles have really never been tested with running the ball the whole game. The one stat I sort of fall back on that makes me feel a little bit better about it, I've brought this up in the past, is our average yards per play on the run, and we're still towards the top of the league there. In fact, we're tied for 5th in the league in rushing defense when you talk about yards per play. So we're still towards the top of the league when you're talking about yards per play. So I really think that underscores that the Eagles defense does have a good rushing defense. It just really has not been tested over the course of a full game. It'll be interesting to see if they can continue that, if a team's able to do that. I'll get to my prediction in a moment, but I really think I could see this game going one of two ways, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But let's first of all flip a little bit and talk about the other side of the ball and our offense against their defense. Their defense is just kind of average. They've really got average rankings across the board. They're 11th in overall yardage, and that's split pretty evenly between passing and rushing in the sense that they're 11th against the pass, they're 12th against the rush, so there's really no difference there. They're 15th in scoring, so they're giving up a little bit more than what the average of their yards would suggest, but it's really not that big of a disparity. So they're really sort of right in that middle area of the league in all of these statistics. Now, the interesting thing about the Bears is their pass defense sort of is a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde, it seems, because they're really good at getting to the quarterback. They're tied for 5th in the league for sacks. Interestingly enough, they have the same amount of sacks as the Eagles defense, both at 29 on the season so far. So they're tied for 5th in the league in sacks, but then they rank 21st in the league in terms of opponents' quarterback passer rating against them. So that suggests that they're able to get to the quarterback, but when they don't get to the quarterback is able to have success throwing the ball. So their passing yardage might get sort of thrown off skew a little bit because of that, because sacks obviously reduce your passing yardage, But then if the quarterback is able to have success when he does throw the ball, that might make up for some of it. So that's going to be, once again, very important to protect Carson Wentz and make sure that, if the offensive line continues to protect him the way they have been for the most part the last few games, I think we should be in good shape there. So all in all, there's really nothing in the Bears defense that really scares me. It's a solid defense. It's not a great defense, but it's not a horrible defense. But we should be able to score against, as well as our offense is playing right now, especially if we keep the balance and we make sure we really stick with the running game. I think that the balance on our offense is going to be too much for them to handle, and we will be able to score points. The question is, how often are we scoring them, and how often are we getting the ball versus the Bears trying to control the ball and run the clock? And that's where I really could see this game going one of two ways. The first way is that the Bears do play that, that game control, that clock management style of offense. They prevent our offense from having a lot of opportunities. They limit the number of possessions in the game. They try to run as much clock off with every possession that they can, and they move the ball methodically on the ground and try and score points on drives. If that's the case, then I think this game, I think the Eagles would still win in a game like that, because ultimately I don't think the Bears have enough weapons, and I think that if we are able to hold them to field goals and we're able to score touchdowns, that's a losing battle then for the Bears. I think we still can win a game like that, but it might be more in the 7 to 10 point range in terms of victories. The second possibility is that we get off to a really hot start and score a couple of, touchdowns early and get a big lead on them early, similar to like we did against Arizona or Denver. And then the game could sort of spiral out of control for the Bears and we just blow their doors off. And in that case, you're talking a score that would end up being like 45-10 or something like that, where, we would just absolutely destroy them. I think that could happen as well, because if that happens and they turn into one-dimensional and they have to get away from the running game, Trubisky, I don't think is going to be able to beat us for over the period of a whole game. And that's going to mean that our defense is going to have its ears pinned back and going for him, everything. And Jim Schwartz is going to send everything at him he can. And I think that leads to turnovers, which only leads usually to more points. So I think it could be one of those things where it spirals out of control if we are able to get an early lead. Which raises an interesting question, because for the most part, when the Eagles have won the coin toss, they've usually deferred to the second half. This might be one of the rare instances where you'd actually want to take the ball first in the first half and try and get something positive immediately and really start putting pressure on the Bears to try and keep up with you in a scoring game. Because if you do that, the Bears are going to really start to falter, and I think that could sort of start that spiral that I'm talking about. Of course, we also have to talk about the idea of this potentially being a letdown game or a trap game or whatever you want to call it. It's sort of a strange game during the season in the sense that it's coming off a huge division win the week before, where basically you clinched the division, all but mathematically you've clinched the division. And it's right before a West Coast road trip where you're playing the two top teams in the NFC West. So there could be a tendency to have a letdown after that game and a look ahead to the next two games. So it could have a letdown game. This team, for the most part, has not fallen prey to any of those kind of trap situations. That's one of the reasons why I picked against them in the Chargers game, is I thought it was going to be a classic letdown kind of a situation, and it didn't happen for them. And they were able to just still continue to have success and keep moving on. So I don't really think that that's going to happen to this team, but it could create maybe a slow start, a sluggish start. And if that's the case, it's probably going to be more like that first scenario I laid out, where the Bears are able to keep it close, but ultimately they just don't have enough to beat us. And in the end, it ends up being, like a 7 to 10, or in the case of my prediction, 11-point victory. So that's actually my prediction for the game. I think that's the way it'll go. My score is going to be Eagles 24, Bears 13. I think the Eagles end up winning it comfortably towards the end, but there might be, some times in even the third quarter where you're like, are we really going to end up blowing this thing? But ultimately, I think we're going to be too much, and the Bears aren't going to be able to keep up with us. So I think that's the way I see this game playing out. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you think that this is going to be an easy win? We're going to be able to blow the doors off the Bears and blow them out like I laid out in the second scenario? Or are you concerned about this game and think that there could be a letdown, or even that where we could actually even lose this game? Leave your comments below. I'll go ahead and check in, give you my thoughts after the game's over. Until then, fly Eagles fly.